Hey y'all, Brandy here. So, I have to admit, I wasn't planning on putting out a video this week. We suffered a bit of a tragedy, and we're not really feeling up to filming. But that being said, we're planning on curling up and marathoning the new episodes of The Witcher and having breakfast for dinner, which is awesome. But it's that kind of night, so I'm probably giving that kind of energy. Forgive me. But with all that being said, I've wanted to dedicate a UFO video for quite a while now. And I didn't really know how to do that. Something has happened in the UFO community, the UFO world, however, that is very important, and I personally think that my viewers would like to know about it. And I also think that it's kind of important that the general public be told about it. It's probably everywhere by now, but I just wanted to get on here and summarize it for my people and maybe some others who haven't heard about it, that happened to come across this video. So how do you get the federal government to admit that they have been perpetrating a cover-up on the American public for decades now, using our own money to keep things secret from us for decades? We're talking since maybe the 1930s. You piss off the right members of Congress, apparently. At least that's what seems to have happened here. And without further ado, this is probably going to be a bit of a long video, so go ahead and grab your favorite beverage, get cozy, get comfy, maybe grab a snack, and let's get into it. Cheers. All right, you guys. So, last week, I had seen a press conference given by Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee and Congresswoman Luna of Florida. I kind of watched it for a little bit. I'm going to link the press conference in the description box down below, so I suggest that you guys go watch it, and you can kind of see everybody's demeanor because they are very unhappy individuals. And I was just kind of wondering what happened. So to go ahead and summarize the meeting for you, it's 22 minutes long, by the way. He stated that in previous hearings all day, and when he uses the word they, he's talking about the Pentagon. In previous hearings, and there have been two, and they were laughable. I caught them. It didn't have any information. It was pitiful, really pitiful. I was angry and disappointed. But he said that all they did, meaning the Pentagon, was send in bureaucrats that only gave one of two answers to any questions that they asked. And that was either, I don't know, or that's classified. And that's exactly what they did. He promised during this presser that in this upcoming then, but we know it happened yesterday, Congressional Oversight Committee hearing, that they would actually get to the bottom of a few things. There would be some transparency and some great information for the public that they felt that they should know. And he was going to be showcasing three witnesses, three really good witnesses, in my opinion, that were going to tell us about their experiences as well as present any evidence that they could. And that's exactly what happened. He also stated that they got a ton of pushback, even trying to hold the hearing, as far as getting people a place to hold the hearing, people to help run things as far as the hearing goes. A lot of Congress people, a lot of other government officials, the intelligence community, NASA even backed out on them. They weren't happy about this subject being talked about. He said, Burchett said that clearly a whole lot of folks didn't want this information to come to light, And he also said, and I quote, either they do exist or they don't exist. And he's talking about UAPs here. They, the Pentagon, say that they don't, but then they block every attempt to try to get to the information that may very well prove that they do exist. And we're going to get to the bottom of it, dadgummit. Whatever the truth may be, we're done with the cover-ups. Now, he also went on to say that the Oversight Committee is calling for transparency, and Representative Luna went on to inform the reporters that they had been stonewalled by the Pentagon and the Air Force. She says that these entities answer to Congress, and they seem to have forgotten that. She also says that after all of the things that they had gone through and just trying to get this information and trying to hold this hearing, that, you know, she wasn't a big believer before, but that now she was absolutely certain, she had no doubt that things are being hidden. Representative Burleson, who was also at the presser, said that he believes in reality. He's a bit of a skeptic. He says that he doesn't believe in conspiracies, but as the Oversight Committee, he says that they owe it to our servicemen and women to keep them safe in the skies. He also informed us that last year alone, there were 14 in-air near misses with these UAPs. I'm going to be using that. UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. I'll probably be using them interchangeably, but I'm talking about the same things, the same object things. He also went on to say that this non-transparency is absolutely what the Oversight Committee is there to prevent from happening. He said that ultimately it is their responsibility to demand answers for the public, and that's exactly what he intends on doing. Burchett went on to tell about the Gates debacle, and we'll get to that in 1 second. But he added, he and Representative Luna added their own asides, calling the general of this, you know what, let me go ahead and tell you what happened. Okay, so Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida received a protected disclosure saying that there had been a UAP incident on Eglin Air Force Base in his home state of Florida. It went on to say that it required his immediate attention. So Gaetz went to investigate. He goes to Eglin Air Force Base, and he takes Congressman Tim Burchett and Congresswoman Luna with him. When they get there, they request to speak with the flight crew involved to be debriefed, and also to see any images, any video, any radar data, any FLIR information that may have been taken, you know, all of that stuff. When they got there, they were denied access to all of that. This is what Burchett goes on to talk about. He says that the general of Eglin Air Force Base was beyond arrogant, and Representative Luna came in and said that it was indeed the commanding general of Eglin. I Googled this and I found out that that general is General Jeffrey Garrity. So way to be an ass there, Jeffrey. I don't know what not giving us this info or not allowing them to speak to the witnesses did for you, but it's kind of an ass move. So that's just my opinion. After how did Gaetz put it? After a conversation about how authority goes in the United States of America, they were afforded a glance at an image, and they were allowed to talk to the single member of the flight crew who took the image. Gaetz actually says this, and this is pretty impressive, so I want to make sure that I get this right. I want to quote. Gaetz describes the image as, and I'm quoting, something I am unable to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter. having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA, and that is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's basically like the Batcave of the federal government, and advanced technologies for several years. Gates said that when speaking to the crew member, he asked why there was no video of the incident, no FLIR taken, and FLIR stands for Forward-Looking Infrared Radar, I believe. And he was told by the flight crew member that they were actually out on a test mission, and normally when they do these test runs, traffic is cleared from the airspace, so there shouldn't have been anything out there that they would have encountered. However, their radar picked up, I believe it was 4 objects flying in a diamond formation, 4 or 6 objects, I can't remember, flying in a diamond formation, and they couldn't physically see these things with their own eyes, but the radar picked it up. One of the pilots decided that he was going to try to take a closer look. When he did this, I believe it's the one that they're speaking to. When he did this, the objects immediately jammed his radar, which is a big deal because that's considered an act of war, as well as knocked out his automated instruments as far as reconnaissance instruments, right? Like his cameras, his FLIR system, and things like that. So he had to manually take a picture of this object, which he did. Gates says that he can only describe it as an orb, and that the way that it maneuvered, again, he stresses that there was no way that man would be able to make anything resembling that now, or in the recent, future. We wouldn't be able to do it. We're talking 10 to 20 years out. So, that is what ultimately caused this hearing that we had yesterday. And, I have to say, Congress, as far as I'm aware, they have Title 10 and Title 50 clearance. That means that they pretty much should have access to anything that they want. Except for when it comes to these particular kinds of projects, right? And I think that it irked them when they requested this information and the military told them no. So let's go ahead and get to the hearing, shall we? It showcased 3 witnesses. We have Ryan Graves. I believe he's a lieutenant, but he has a degree in chemical and aerospace engineering. After graduating college, he decided to join the Navy, where he flew F-18s for about a decade in combat, and then afterwards he was an instructor. He says that in late 2013, early 2014, on a typical flight training mission, they started seeing these objects. First, they began to pick them up on radar, but they weren't seeing them. The first time that his group, I believe it was the Red Wings, actually had any kind of contact, physical contact with these objects, it was when 2 F-18s were closing in on one in particular. This one maneuvered between the F-18s and almost caused an in-air collision. They described these objects as being large, blackish, gray cubes inside of a clear, transparent sphere. They said that the corners were actually touching the walls of this sphere.
Black or dark gray cube, and that cube was inside of a clear, translucent sphere.
At that particular time, they were flying 10 miles off of the East Coast. They also documented them later on because they were seeing them all the time. They were documented as going up to Mach 2. When this happened, there were no sonic booms heard. As far as the G-forces, Graves stated that there was no way that a human pilot would be able to withstand those forces, and that they would have pretty much died, as well as, you know, that aircraft not, I don't know. It wouldn't have been good. G-forces are not good for pilots, apparently. When asked why it was that he came forward, he says that it was mainly to try to inform the public that these things are in fact real. Not only are they real, but they are a threat to our national security. They are a very big safety hazard to our pilots, commercial and military, and that something needs to be done. Our second witness is, he came out, he calls himself a whistleblower. He actually came out just 2 months ago, and this is David Grush. And his resume is quite long. I will allow Mr. Grush to tell you in his own words exactly what he's been through and what's brought him to the hearing today.
My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP task force, and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's Briefing Staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting a variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, that was a lot. Yeah, he said it better than I ever could. Our third witness is Commander David Fravor, who I've seen before. He's been on Joe Rogan and a couple of other things. Commander Fravor is a Navy pilot. He is leader of the Black Aces, and he was involved in the infamous Tic Tac video, which was a group of 3 videos that happened to be released back in 2017 when Leslie Kean blew the lid off of this UFO secrecy thing, when she worked with Lou Elizondo of the and Tom DeLong of I believe it's the To the Stars Academy, TTSA group, and they're basically the ones that did the Tic Tac video, the gimbal video, and the Go Fast video. And he talks about his encounter. He says that he and 3 other sets of eyeballs were tasked with checking out odd things that the radar operator on the USS Nimitz had been seeing for a few weeks. In short, they'd been seeing these objects on radar that would be kind of hanging out above 80,000 feet, which is space for those of us who didn't know that. And what would happen is they would kind of be hanging out up there, and then they would drop in less than a second to around 20,000 feet in altitude. They would just be stationary. Sometimes the winds would get up to 140 knots. We're talking hurricane level winds, and they wouldn't move. They would just stay for hours, and then they would zip straight back up in the same amount of time it took them to come down in the first place. We're talking less than a second. So they were taken off a training mission, and they were tasked with going to check these things out because it just so happened on this particular day when they were going to have planes in the air, these things show up again. When they arrived at their merge plot, which means the planes and this object are in the same airspace, they noticed, Fravor and his other pilot, his wingman, his Wizzos, noticed a patch of disturbed white water on the ocean, and he says it was off the coast of San Diego. It was a perfect day. He said the ocean was just like a mirror. It was perfectly still, like glass, except for this patch of white water. He describes it as something being just under the surface. It appeared to be maybe a cross shape, but it was about the size of a 747. However, they couldn't see it clearly. What they did see was this object that looked like a Tic Tac. He could see no discernible seams, no portholes, no windows, nothing. He said the only thing that he could see were 2 little prong-like appendages that stuck out from underneath it. That was it. He said that this Tic Tac UAP was above this object that was just under the surface of the water, and it was pinging like a ping pong ball in a glass box, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, around this object. Commander Fravor told his other pilot that he was going to go down for a closer look, and she decided she was going to hang out up there so she could keep an eye on both of them at the same time, a different point of view. So as Fravor is going down, he's making a circle to descend. This thing apparently took notice of him, and it begins to mirror his images, or his movements, begins to mirror his movements. At about 15,000 feet in altitude, this thing is jamming radars, an act of war, and it stops, and suddenly they just lose sight of it. It's just gone. He couldn't see it anymore. The other airwoman couldn't see it anymore. And so it had zipped off to the west, and they turned to the east to go back to the Nimitz. On their way back, as they turned, the radar operator excitedly comes over the radio, and he's exclaiming, sir, you won't believe this. This thing is at your cap point. Now, a cap point is a meeting area, a staged meeting point that nobody knows about. I guess with the exception of the pilot. Now, their cap point was 60 miles away. Nobody knew, other than the pilot, I guess, what their cap point was. And this thing showed up there in under a minute. It knew where they were going. So that in and of itself is really strange. So that was Commander Fravor's incident. He did say that there were no discernible rotors, no rotor wash, no other visible means of propulsion other than those two prongy things that we don't know what they were used for. As promised by Burchett, the congressional hearing was so much more informative than they had been in the past. We actually learned quite a bit. I was really proud of them. We still had plenty of classified information that could only be released to Congress behind closed doors, but we also got to hear a lot. Now, the aim of this meeting isn't necessarily, now it would be great, but it isn't necessarily to get all of this information open and out there to the public, because they know that's not going to happen. You know, Congress knows. What they're trying to do is, under oath, the three witnesses were put under oath, they're trying to get their statements on the record. What that does is it lets Congress go back and know where the evidence went to, and you can kind of read between the lines in the way that the questions are answered. So I'll kind of tell you a little bit about that. But I do suggest that you watch the full hearing. I believe it's about 2 hours and 22 minutes long, and I will link it in the comment box down below. Also, please guys, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. If you like the video, please like it, share it out with other people. I am trying to grow the channel, and that would be a huge help. I would definitely appreciate it. Now, with that being said, right out of the gate, Representative Luna states that the Pentagon has been gaslighting the American public into believing that these UAPs were non-existent for decades. After each witness had an opening statement, the questions began. One area of concern was that a better means of reporting UAP encounters to Congress be implemented. Right now, there really isn't a central location for UFO, UAP reports for the government. The Navy was supposed to be coming up with, well, actually, they made it mandatory to report these things, but they're not being reported. You know, you have the people that are in fear of retaliation and reprisals for reporting such things. It tarnishes their career. I mean, it's still a big deal. They say it's not, but it is. And so Graves says that he believes 95% of UAP encounters actually still go unreported. He says there is no means of reporting these UFO encounters to Congress for commercial pilots or the everyday man. He says in the commercial piloting domain, we're talking about our airlines, that reports are aggressively discouraged. The problem with the lack of reporting means that there's a lack of data, right? And we can't analyze what we don't have. Favor was asked about if he had any kind of follow-up with his superiors after his sighting, and he stated that no, he was actually surprised. There were none. Nobody asked him any questions, nothing. He also didn't suffer any retaliation or reprisals when he actually came out and talked about it. So, take that for what you will. They were also asked if they thought everything should be public domain or if they agreed that some things should remain classified. They each understood the need for certain things to be classified information, such as how we gather intelligence, our specific technology in locating these objects and what have you. But they all said that the object themselves, right, the photos, the videos of these objects, they should be released, because that's not going to hurt anybody. I mean, somebody that actually sees one of these things may report it, because instead of thinking, I bet that's something our government has, they would be like, you know what, I saw that thing and that is a UAP and that is not ours, so let me call and report it. Favor also said that he thought a lot of things were actually over classified. He said, for instance, somebody takes a UAP video with their cell phone, clear image, you see it plain as day, right? What is that going to hurt? It's a cell phone image. The Pentagon takes it, they throw it in a vault, it never again sees the light of day. And so that way we can never study it. So I think I probably have to agree with him there. What do you think? Do you think that there is a need for secrecy in some areas, such as how we gather information and intel, or do you think that everything should be known to the public? They were also asked if they thought that UAPs were a serious threat to public safety and the security of our country. Each one said absolutely that they thought that it should be considered a threat and that there are safety concerns for obvious reasons. We have the in-air near misses, and then when it comes to the safety of our country and our national security, Favor and Graves say that there was nothing that they could do against these things. Had these UAPs shown any aggression at all to our pilots or our servicemen and women, they had no recourse. There was no way that they could they could defend themselves against this UAP. So that's scary. That's really scary when you have no avenue to defend yourself if it starts getting uppity, I guess. Burchett came out swinging right off the bat. He's a character, by addressing some really tough questions. He asked about government reprisals that they've received since coming forward, and Grush said that it's been particularly brutal for him and his family, both professionally as well as personally. He said that currently he couldn't release things or say things that he wanted to be able to say because he was currently under a whistleblower investigation. That means prison time for him if he's found to have, disclosed information that he shouldn't have. So he kind of had to lean into materials and evidence that he had already turned over to the inspector generals and things like that. Graves said that he had also received some serious retaliation and reprisals, and Favor, like I said, he said he'd been treated well and he had no issues. Burchett went on to ask if they or anyone they were aware of had been physically harmed by a UAP or by any attempt to cover up the UAP incidents. Grush said that absolutely. He had personally been harmed, and he knew of others that had been also. Burchett doubled down and asked Grush point blank if he had any knowledge of anyone that had been murdered due to UAPs or the UAP cover-ups. Grush said, of course, he has to be extremely careful in what he says in this open session concerning this question, but that people had approached him with specific information on this particular topic. He documented it and then he sent them to the appropriate authorities, if that kind of tells you anything. Now, Grush also, well, we'll get to that. Grush also stated that he had been in fear of his life ever since he came forward. He has absolutely nothing to gain positively by coming forward, and that he's doing so out of a sense of duty. He says that he took an oath when he first joined the military, and that oath still stands to this day, to uphold his country and the Constitution, and that's exactly what he plans on doing. Representative Luna asked about AARO, and that stands for an All-Domain Aerospace Reporting Office, I believe. She asked about their lack of follow-up on reports and data that pointed to the existence of UAPs. Grush stated that he had provided Dr. Kirkpatrick, who is the director of AARO, with information that he had obtained and investigated, along with other evidence when Dr. Kirkpatrick was first placed over the project, and that for whatever reason, and he said that he couldn't read his mind, Dr. Kirkpatrick had decided to not follow up on what he was given. Graves was asked to detail an incident that happened involving a UAP on Vandenberg Air Force Base. In 2003, he says a large group of Boeing contractors were working on the launch facilities at the base. Imagine their surprise when they saw 100-yard red square. So we're talking a 4-sided 100-yard square, I guess in diameter, UAP come from the direction of the ocean. It chilled out there, kind of staring at them for about 45 seconds, and then it shot off towards the mountains. This thing came back 24 hours later, and it was aggressively moving towards the Air Force Base. It would move towards the facility, I guess rather quickly, almost like a charging sort of manner, and then kind of back off. We're talking about this is a football field. A football field, right? Imagine a floating football field coming at your face. It's not a good thing. Anyway, it zipped off. It did this to them several times, and then it zipped off. He said that the entire incident had indeed been documented, and it was also turned over to Congress behind closed doors. Graves was asked if commercial pilots were receiving cease and desist letters if they came out with reports, and he said that yes, corporations were putting themselves above the safety of the public and telling their pilots not to report these things. Representative Moskowitz asked about the general physics of these aircrafts. The witnesses all stated that no human could withstand these G-forces of the speeds that these crafts hit upon takeoff, or they would zoom in, they would do right angles at supersonic speeds. These would rip human beings apart or explode them or something. I don't really know. But the way that they maneuvered, there was no way. They all said that there was no way that we had, and Grush has a physics degree, and he says that with the technology that we have right now, or any technology that we're going to have in the future, we can't replicate these things. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to link in the description box down below an interview that Grush had with News Nation, I believe, when he first came out, and what he said to them. Grush basically says, and I'm going to skip, some things here. Grush basically says a couple of things. Our government has gotten crashed vehicles that are made by non-human hands and are not of this planet. He calls them off-world, non-human vehicles, right? He says that we have had these things crashed, and our government has gone out and retrieved the pieces of these things. He also states that, and he's under oath, you guys, remember that. He's under oath. He also states that in some of these crashes, there were also non-human biologics that were also taken for study or somewhere, but that our government is in possession of these aliens, these non-human bodies. And Congress is taking that very seriously. Which is awesome. I mean, that, to me, that's a cool thing. He was also asked, you know what, we're going to talk now. He was also asked about where he thought these things came from and how these things could be so technically advanced, and they're coming from other galaxies. They're coming billions of light years, and they managed to crash here on our little planet, right? And they're so technologically superior to us. Well, Grush says even we, in all of our technology, have crashes, we have accidents, and that it's the same with them. And as far as traveling these billions of light years, that he's not so sure that that's exactly how it's done. He says it could be that they are traveling interdimensionally or bending space-time and traveling through wormholes. He's also careful to say that that is just a theory, but that's the lead thing that they're thinking at the moment. Getting into the cover-up, Burchett says that you have to follow the financials. They were asked about corporations and monies. Moskowitz actually asks Burchett exactly how these companies are getting away with not notifying Congress of these super secret, covert, illegal projects, and exactly how they're being funded. Grush kind of tells him that he would be able to tell him behind closed doors, but that he couldn't actually tell him publicly. Moskowitz interrupts him and says, is this kind of like how we appropriate funds for one project and it's actually allocated to a different project? And yes, that's true. There's also, he says that we're paying these government contractors to make for us certain things, certain products, software, certain things. And they do so. They develop it, and then they charge the federal government to purchase it. They overcharge the federal government for what we've already kind of paid for, and then they disperse these monies into other projects, as you will. As far as notifying Congress, there is a thing called the IRAD, and that stands for, oh gosh, it's IRAD. And let me see, I would think that I put down exactly what that was, what that meant, right? But I don't know if I did or not. No, I don't guess I did. I'll put it up here somewhere. Sorry, guys. Anyway, the IRAD program thing says that they have to notify Congress. So Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez jumps in, and she wants to know exactly how they're doing that. Is this a situation where they're notifying a dead email box and then saying, hey, we notified Congress, and Congress actually knows nothing about it? He stated that, yes, that was part of how they did it. He also said that when it comes to these IRAD programs, that the loophole is they don't say when Congress has to be notified. There are no requirements set to notify Congress at any certain point before starting or hitting any milestone, and that when it comes to money or profits or anything like that, that's left up to the discretion of the contractor, say Boeing or Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas or anything like that, and they don't have to report that, so they don't. Keep in mind, most of these profits we've paid for as taxpayers. We've paid for them to be able to do the research to make these things. And we're paying to use them too. Oh, it's crazy. So there was a Mr. Biggs of Arizona, and he said that I believe it was a John Kirby, had stated previously that UAPs were wreaking havoc on military training facilities all over the U.S. They were actually aggressively approaching our military men and women. They were scaring them. Keep in mind, there's no way that these people can protect themselves from these sorts of things. And they're interrupting missile launches. They're interrupting artillery battles and tests and, different things like that. And that kind of puts a damper on our military timeline for certain things, right? Grush actually didn't know a whole lot about that. I'm sorry. But that Graves stated that, yes, that was true. They are wreaking havoc on our training facilities. And the only thing that he can see to do about it is that they need to start reporting things. They need to be allowed to do so. They need to be encouraged to do so by having certain protections put in place to make sure that their careers and their families and everything were safe from any kind of retaliation or reprisals. That was the best way of handling that situation. Again, they were asked about people being harmed by these, and they had asked Grush if he had seen any crafts or bodies firsthand. Grush states that he had to be very careful with his words here, but that he had seen crafts. He had first-hand contact, but he had to give them this evidence in a closed-door session, but that he himself had not directly laid eyes on these non-human entities. There is a Representative Ogles. I really liked this guy. He was no nonsense. He asked them yes or no questions. He asked them, did they think that these UAPs were doing reconnaissance of our systems? Were they trying to learn our secrets? Each one of these witnesses answered in the affirmative. He asked them if they thought that they were prodding, searching for weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and each one of the witnesses replied with the affirmative. And did they feel like it was a threat to national safety? And of course, yet again, they answered yes. And Representative Ogles asked about the Holman, oh my gosh, Holman resolution. He said that he wanted to speak to these people. He wanted to talk to these generals. He wanted access to all of this information. And if they were denied, that he himself would request that the Holman resolution be done. And I checked into what that was. And it's basically, right, where Congress, if you tell them no, they can affect your salary. They can fire you. There are a lot of different things. If it's a program and they're requesting information from you and you refuse to give them said information, like Boeing and their secret projects, or Raytheon and their secret projects, your funding can be cut. Congress can take your funding. Burchett goes on to ask exactly who was responsible for being able to give the appropriate permissions to be able to access these projects. Grush states that it's actually a panel of career servicemen, both military and government officials, that are in and out of the government as far as being retired or still employed, that make the decision on who has access and who doesn't. Burchett asks for names, And once again, Grush says that he has already turned all of that evidence over to the inspectors general. So Congress would be able to get it there. He had also asked if the federal government was currently in the act of reverse engineering these UAP, these extraterrestrial vehicles, these spacecrafts, and Grush told them yes, that they were in the middle of it. Burchett also asked them exactly how long the federal government had known that these things were otherworldly, made by non-human hands. And Grush says since at least the 1930s. So, it's getting hot in here, you guys. I have to hurry up so I can turn that air back on because I'm dying over here. And that's basically it. You know, please go watch those other links down below. It was so interesting. It was really refreshing to hear our government. And keep in mind, this is a bipartisan effort, right? It was really nice to see our government getting along to accomplish a goal. And at least the two parties can agree that this is something that is so important that they can put their little pettiness aside. And I was very glad to see that. So that's it. They are going to get access to this. They're going to hold behind the doors hearings, and then they're going to release reports to us, the public, and that's awesome. That's awesome, you guys. And that is all of the information that I have for you today. At least trying to put into, like I said, there's so much information when it comes to the UFO world. I mean, it's crazy. So, yeah, this is just my little bit. Tune in next time when we're going to discuss, we're going to take some UFO reports case by case. We're going to be talking about some major whistleblowers and how they've affected disclosure. And like I said, we're going to go down that road. We're just going to do it in reverse. So I look forward to seeing you then. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into a discussion in the comments. I really enjoy hearing what you guys think about a subject. You know, just keep it respectful. And we can agree to disagree, but I really, really want to hear what you guys think about it. So let's get into it in the discussion box down below. And that's it. That's it. I'm really glad that I got to talk to you guys. And until next time, remember, say your prayers, send out good vibes, and always try to stay in the light. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye, y'all. It's hot.